Hello, horror fans. Today I will tell you a scary story that will shock you. I warn you, children, stay away from the screens. This story is full of paranormal events.
I'll start by saying this. I never wanted to go to Chernobyl. I didn't even know why I had ended up there. Sometimes, I wonder if I was led there. If fate, or something darker, had set my path on a collision course with that forsaken place. Either way, I'm here now, and I have to finish telling this story, if only to make sense of what happened. Or maybe to make sure someone else doesn't end up where we did. We were a group of 4, 5 if you count the guy who had the idea in the first place. His name was Jason, and he was always the one pushing us into the dangerous stuff. He was the kind of guy who couldn't resist a good thrill, the kind of guy who thought adventure meant throwing caution to the wind. The rest of us were along for the ride. I was supposed to be taking a break from life, recovering from the weight of my own demons, and the others were just bored, looking for something exciting to fill the endless summer days. Looking back, maybe we should have just stayed home. I should have just listened to that little voice in the back of my head. It started as a joke at first. Jason had been toying with the idea of going to Chernobyl for weeks. It's a ghost town, he'd said. No one goes there anymore. It's just ruins now, radioactive wasteland. It'll be incredible. We were skeptical, of course. The government's warnings about the radiation levels and the hazards were no joke, but Jason had that way of getting into your head. He wasn't going to let it go, and before long, the rest of us were swept up in his excitement. We all packed up and rented a van. There were 4 of us in total: Jason, myself, and 2 others, Mike and Sarah. We didn't really know what we were in for, and I think, deep down, none of us thought it would actually be that dangerous. We crossed into the exclusion zone on a hazy afternoon. The road was eerily quiet, empty for miles. Jason was the first one to speak up when we reached the outskirts of the city. "Can you feel it?" he asked, his voice too excited for the situation. "Feel what?" Mike replied, his voice sharp, as though he was trying to dismiss the unease in the air. "The energy. The radiation," Jason said. "You know, this place is a hotbed of history, right? The stories, the memories, they are in the walls. You can feel it." I didn't feel anything at first. But as we approached the crumbling remnants of Pripyat, the abandoned city just a few miles from the reactor, the air grew heavy. The wind picked up dust and flung it into the streets, swirling debris in strange patterns. The tall, dilapidated buildings seemed to lean toward us, their shattered windows like hollow eyes staring down at us. The place was more oppressive than I expected. Not just because it was deserted, but because it felt wrong. The abandoned amusement park, the rusted bumper cars, the crumbling apartment blocks, it all had a sense of death to it, a stillness that couldn't be ignored. But Jason was eager to move forward. He grabbed his camera and started snapping pictures of everything, his excitement bubbling over. "Come on, let's go deeper," he urged, and against my better judgment, we followed him. We didn't stop at the edges of the city. We went inside, past the caution tape and the warning signs. Mike and Sarah were reluctant, but Jason kept pushing us. "What's the worst that can happen? It's been years. The radiation levels are low. We're fine." We walked through the streets for hours, exploring the empty buildings, finding old Soviet-era artifacts hidden in the wreckage. But then, the air grew colder. Not just temperature-wise, but in the way it felt, like it was pressing in on us. We made our way to the hospital next. It was an old, towering building, looming ominously in the distance, and I remember thinking that it looked like something out of a nightmare, its once white walls now covered in grime and decay. We wandered in, unsure of what we were looking for, but unable to ignore the pull of the place. The hospital had been abandoned, but the scent of old chemicals, of dust, of something foul, lingered in the air. The deeper we ventured into the building, the more I felt something stirring. Jason was taking pictures, talking excitedly, but I was uneasy. I kept hearing things, whispers that didn't belong, sounds that shouldn't have been there. It wasn't the wind or the groans of the building. It was something else. Something watching us. Mike and Sarah started to get nervous too, their faces pale, eyes darting to every corner. "I'm telling you, guys, something's not right," Mike said, his voice strained, but Jason just laughed. It's all in your head. This place is dead. Relax. And that's when it happened. We were in the main hallway, just outside the morgue. The flickering of the light above was the only sound. That's when I heard it. A low, guttural sound, almost like a growl, followed by a scrape of claws on concrete. It was a sound that made my heart stop, but when I turned to look, I saw nothing. Jason was still oblivious, still walking ahead, but then Mike stopped dead in his tracks, his face ashen. "Did you hear that?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. I nodded, but before I could say anything, a shrill noise, like a shriek, echoed down the hallway. The kind of sound that claws at your soul, fills you with dread. I froze, paralyzed with fear. Jason turned around, confused at first, but then his face shifted to something I'll never forget. His eyes widened, his mouth gaped open, and his camera slipped from his hands. It was there. At the end of the hallway. A massive creature. It was black. Darker than the shadows, darker than the walls. Its form was humanoid but twisted, 3 heads that were contorted and shriveled, each one misshapen, with hollow eyes that glowed faintly in the dim light. Its body was long and sinewy, covered in what looked like rotting, scale-like skin. Their heads turned toward us simultaneously, and for a moment, I thought I could hear their voices, low, unearthly whispers, a chorus of hatred that rippled through the air like a distorted song. It was the last thing we saw before the lights went out. We ran. I don't even remember exactly what happened next. Everything became a blur of panic, chaos, and terror, but I remember hearing it. The sound of something massive moving behind us, closing in with every step. Its claws scraped the walls, the floor, and the air seemed to pulse with the weight of its presence. Jason was the first to go. I can still see it now, his face twisted in terror, his mouth opening in a scream that never came out. We were too far from the exit, too far from safety. He turned, desperate to run, but it was already upon him. The creature's middle head opened its mouth wide, and I saw its rows of teeth, black and jagged, as it lunged forward with unearthly speed. Jason's scream was cut short, swallowed by the darkness. I didn't stop to look back. "Run!" I shouted to Mike and Sarah, who were already ahead of me, but frozen in place with fear. "Don't look back, just run." We dashed through the crumbling hallways, not knowing where we were going, just knowing we had to escape. The place felt alive, like it was shifting and closing in on us. The hallways twisted and turned in ways that didn't make sense. I could hear the creature's footsteps, its growls, echoing behind us, but I dared not turn around. I could feel the weight of its gaze on my back, like it was already choosing who it would take next. We reached the stairs, and Sarah stumbled, falling behind. I grabbed her arm, pulling her up. "Come on, we can't stop." Mike, who had been leading, was ahead of us now, his breath ragged, his face pale. He glanced over his shoulder, and for a brief moment, I saw the pure, unfiltered terror in his eyes. Then, as if the weight of his own fear was too much to bear, he screamed. It was like a chain reaction. Sarah screamed, I screamed, and we all just bolted up the stairs, not daring to look behind us. The steps creaked under our feet as if the building itself was crumbling with every footstep, but we didn't stop. The creature, that thing, wasn't just hunting us, it was playing with us, toying with us, letting us think we could escape, only to snatch us away in an instant. The higher we went, the more the air seemed to thicken, heavier with every breath. The scent of decay, of rot, of something unnatural filled our lungs. It wasn't just the smell of an abandoned building. No, this was something far worse. It was as if the place itself had become part of the creature, a manifestation of its hunger, its rage. At the top of the stairs, we found a door. It was cracked open, a faint sliver of daylight barely shining through. We burst through it, and for a moment, it felt like we might have made it. We were out of the building, into the open air, but then I turned around, and I saw it. The creature had followed us. It was standing at the doorway of the hospital, its 3 heads tilted to the side, its eyes glowing like embers in the dark. The middle head let out a low growl, and the other 2 followed in a sickening chorus of sound. It was almost like the creature was listening to us, waiting for us to make our move. Mike, panting, backed up slowly. His eyes were wide with terror, his body trembling. "We need to go. We need to go now," he whispered, but it was already too late. The creature moved with an unnatural speed, its bodies twisting and shifting, its long, segmented legs propelling it forward. It crossed the threshold of the door in a single bound, its claws scraping across the concrete. The ground beneath it shook with the force of its movement, as though the earth itself was terrified of it. "Run!" I screamed again, but this time, I didn't have to say it. We were already running, our legs moving faster than they had ever moved before. The streets of Pripyat were empty, silent, but I could hear it behind us, its heavy breathing, its growls, its claws. It wasn't even trying to be quiet anymore. It was hunting us, and there was no escape. The air was thick with dread, suffocating. My heart pounded in my chest, and I could feel the sweat trickling down my back. We ran for what felt like hours, but there was no end. No escape. Every corner we turned, every alleyway we thought might lead us to safety, was just another trap. The city had become a labyrinth, and the creature was the warden, the predator that knew every twist and turn. I lost track of Mike and Sarah. At some point, they were just gone, swallowed by the darkness. I didn't stop. I couldn't. My body was screaming in pain, my legs were giving out, but I couldn't let myself stop, not until I saw the fence, the chain-link fence that surrounded the city, the one I thought was my ticket out. I pushed myself forward, adrenaline surging through me. The gate was just ahead. If I could reach it, if I could climb over it, I would make it. But I could feel it getting closer. The sound of its feet pounding the earth, faster now, closer. I reached the fence and scrambled, my hands slipping as I tried to pull myself over. But the creature wasn't far behind. I could hear its breath on my neck, feel its presence. My fingers barely grazed the top of the fence when I heard a sound, a sickening crack, followed by a guttural screech that made my blood run cold. I looked down, its middle head had lunged at me, its mouth wide, its teeth ready to snap down on my flesh. I tried to pull away, but my legs were already too weak. Its claws scraped at my back, its hot breath burning my skin. It was the end. I thought I was done for, but then something happened. The fence creaked. The creature froze for a moment, its three heads tilting in confusion. It stopped, its black eyes narrowing in the distance. I didn't wait to figure out why. With everything I had left, I pushed myself over the fence, landing hard on the other side. I barely caught myself before crashing into the ground, my head spinning, my body aching with exhaustion. I forced myself to my feet, stumbled toward the trees that lined the outskirts of Pripyat, and ran. I don't know how far I went, but eventually, I collapsed. I woke up in a daze, the sun hanging low in the sky. I had no idea where I was, how I had gotten there, or whether I had actually escaped. The creature, the thing, was still out there. Somewhere, and I knew one thing for sure, it wouldn't stop. The forest was silent. The kind of silence that makes you feel like you're the last person on Earth. It was a strange feeling, sitting there in the woods outside Pripyat, trying to catch my breath, trying to make sense of what had happened. My mind raced, but everything felt too surreal to process. That thing, the creature with the three heads, it didn't belong here. It didn't belong anywhere. I could still hear it in my head. The way its breath came in shallow, ragged gasps, like a predator savoring the scent of fear. I could hear its claws scraping against the concrete, and worse, I could hear its whispers. The voices that had come from it, from its twisted heads. It wasn't just hunting me. It was tormenting me, crawling into my soul. Its very presence gnawed at the edges of my mind, leaving a trail of terror that I couldn't shake. I should have kept running. I don't know how long I lay there, staring at the trees, trying to gather the strength to get back on my feet. My body was aching, every inch of it screaming for rest, for safety, for comfort. But there was no comfort in this place. There was only that thing, and now, it knew I was here. It knew I was still alive. I pushed myself to my feet, clutching my side, feeling the sting of fresh wounds where the creature's claws had raked across my skin. The blood had dried, caking against my shirt, but the pain was still fresh, still raw. I tried to remember how I had escaped. Had it really stopped chasing me, or had I just outrun it? I didn't think it would give up so easily. It was relentless. And that's when it hit me. I hadn't escaped, not really. The trees were dense, but I couldn't hide forever. I was exposed. I didn't know where Mike and Sarah had gone. They had been with me, but now they were gone. I had lost track of them back in Pripyat. They weren't with me anymore. I could feel the weight of that loss in my chest, but I couldn't afford to dwell on it. I had to survive. The sun was beginning to set. The daylight was fading fast, and the world around me seemed to close in, darkening by the second. That's when I heard it. A low, familiar growl, barely audible, but unmistakable. My blood turned to ice. I didn't need to turn around to know it was the creature. Its presence was like a shadow that clung to me, wrapping around me like a noose, tightening with every breath. It had been stalking me, waiting for the moment when I would let my guard down. I ran again, my legs weak, my mind foggy. I didn't know where I was going. I couldn't think straight. All I could do was run. The forest was a maze, and every tree, every rock, seemed like an obstacle to my escape. But I couldn't stop. Not yet. Behind me, the growls grew louder, more distinct. The creature was closing in again. Its massive, three-headed body was faster than anything I had ever seen. It wasn't just hunting, it was toying with me. Playing with me like a cat with its prey. I tripped over a fallen log and hit the ground hard. Pain shot through my body, but I didn't have time to stop. I scrambled to my feet, my heart pounding in my chest. There was nowhere to hide, nowhere to run. Then I saw it, through the trees. Just ahead was a building. It looked like an old structure, maybe a shelter, or a house, or some kind of bunker. It was my only chance. I ran toward it, my breaths ragged, my legs burning. The creature was closer now, its growls deafening. My vision blurred from the adrenaline, but I could still see the flicker of its black form, moving through the trees with terrifying speed. I reached the building and slammed into the door. It was locked, but it wasn't solid. It was old, rotting, like everything else in this forsaken place. I shoved my shoulder into it, and it gave way with a loud crack. The door swung open just enough for me to slip inside. I slammed it shut behind me and locked it, my hands trembling. My breath came in sharp gasps as I backed away from the door, my eyes darting around the dark interior. It was empty. Desolate. The air inside felt cold, stale. I couldn't tell what it was, but there was a strange smell, something musty and putrid. It smelled like death. I pressed my back to the wall, listening. The growls were muffled now, but still audible. The creature was circling, waiting for me to make a move. I could hear its claws scraping against the walls outside the building, scratching, tapping, like it was enjoying the hunt, and then I heard something else. A sound that chilled me to the core. A whisper, come out, wherever you are." It was low, twisted. It didn't come from just one of its heads. No, it came from all of them, a chorus of voices, a mocking song that echoed in the empty space around me. It knew I was inside. I pressed myself deeper into the shadows, my hand clutched tightly around a piece of broken wood I had found on the ground. It wasn't much, but it was all I had. "Leave me alone," I muttered to myself, though I knew it wouldn't hear me. Or maybe it would. Maybe it was already listening. I had to find a way out. I couldn't stay here forever. I had to move. The building had no windows, no other doors, no way out. There was only one way forward, the attic. I had to make it there. Maybe, just maybe, there was something I could use to defend myself. I didn't know what, but I couldn't stay in this dark hole forever. Not with that thing out there. I moved quietly, carefully, toward the stairs. The wood creaked beneath my feet, and I winced, listening for any sign that the creature had heard me. It was silent now, but I knew it was there. Watching. Waiting. I reached the stairs to the attic. I didn't hesitate. I climbed quickly, every step an agony, but I had no choice. The air grew colder the higher I went, and when I reached the attic door, I hesitated for just a moment before forcing it open. Inside, the attic was a maze of old crates, broken furniture, and forgotten relics. It smelled of mold and decay. But there was something else, a strange buzzing, like static in the air. I couldn't place it, but it sent a cold chill through me. I moved further into the attic, my eyes scanning the dark corners, trying to find something that might help me. I had no weapon, no real plan, and no escape, and then I heard it. A noise from behind me, the door creaked open. I turned, my heart stopping in my chest. The creature was there. I saw it, standing in the doorway, its three heads staring at me, its eyes glowing with malice, and it smiled.